If I put this wig in my head, it's over. If I put this wig in my head, it's over. If I put this wig in my head, it's over. But you bitches, cause that bitch finna be mad, okay?
February 23, 2025, began like any other ordinary Sunday in Jackson, Mississippi. The sun rose over the suburban homes, casting a soft glow on the quiet streets of Brook Hollow Drive. For most of the residents, the morning was filled with routine, neighbors collecting their newspapers, families preparing for church, or enjoying a quiet breakfast together. But within the walls of one unassuming home, the course of two lives was about to change forever. Rashawn Wallace, a 30-year-old licensed practical nurse, was no stranger to crisis. She spent her days caring for vulnerable patients, monitoring their health, and offering the comfort only a trained professional could provide. A woman who had built a career devoted to healing, nurturing, and helping others, Rashawn's world was about to be turned upside down. Her husband, Damian Reed, 33, had shared this life with her. The two had built a home together in this quiet corner of Mississippi, raising their young child. To outsiders, they seemed like any other couple, committed, stable, living a typical life. But what many didn't know was that beneath the surface of their seemingly peaceful home, tensions had been quietly brewing. On this particular morning, as Rashawn checked her phone, a seemingly harmless notification would set off a chain of events that would ultimately result in a tragedy, one that no one, least of all Rashawn and Damian, could have ever predicted. What began with a simple Facebook friend request would escalate into a life-altering confrontation. And within hours, Rashawn would go from a wife and mother to someone staring down the possibility of a life sentence. Before we dive deeper into today's chilling case, we want to take a moment to engage with you, our viewers. If you find our stories impactful and want to help support the growth of our channel, please take a second to subscribe. Subscribing ensures that you're always updated with our latest content, and it helps us reach a larger audience, allowing us to continue bringing you fresh crime stories and detailed analyses every day. We genuinely value your thoughts, so feel free to leave your comments below. Share your views on this case, and don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to see how far our stories reach. By liking, sharing, and commenting on our videos, you play an essential role in expanding this community and raising awareness. Your participation makes a difference. Thank you for being part of this journey. Now, let's continue with the story. Rashawn Wallace, a 30-year-old licensed practical nurse, was the epitome of calm. Known for her unwavering composure, she spent her days caring for the most vulnerable members of her community. Whether it was administering medications or offering a kind word, her work required not just skill but a deep sense of empathy. Her hands, trained to heal and comfort, had touched countless lives, and yet on this fateful morning, they would be used in a way that no one could have anticipated, turning from a caregiver to a participant in a tragic, irreversible event. But beyond her professional life, Rashawn had another role, as a wife and a mother. She shared a modest home with her husband, 33-year-old Damian Reed. The two had built a life together on Brook Hollow Drive, a quiet street in Jackson. Their home, although unassuming, was their sanctuary, a place where they should have felt safe. They had a child, a shared dream of a peaceful family life, and from the outside, their world appeared stable, perhaps even perfect. But, like so many relationships, what seemed outwardly perfect was fraught with hidden tensions. Beneath the surface of this seemingly ideal family dynamic, there were cracks, disagreements, unspoken frustrations, and issues that festered quietly in the background. The couple's different approaches to social media, especially Rashawn's growing network of online connections, had created subtle but noticeable strains. Damian, who was protective of his wife, became increasingly uncomfortable with the attention she received on social platforms. Yet, the reality of their relationship, with its complexities and imperfections, would only become evident in the most tragic way. On that Sunday morning, as Rashawn checked her phone, what seemed like a harmless notification, just another Facebook friend request, was the catalyst that would trigger a deadly argument and set the stage for a life-altering moment. In a matter of hours, everything would change. The life they knew would be upended, and their home on Brook Hollow Drive, once a place of safety, would become the scene of a tragic confrontation that no one saw coming. It all started with a seemingly innocuous Facebook notification, just another friend request. For many, this would have been a minor, everyday occurrence, nothing more than a digital gesture. But for Damian Reed, the notification was the spark that would ignite a deadly fire, setting off a chain of events that would end with his life tragically cut short. Damian, already uncomfortable with his wife Rashawn's growing online network, had long been uneasy about her increasing interactions with people on social media. What many might have dismissed as harmless networking, Damian saw as a threat. He had expressed concerns before, but those worries had never led to confrontation, until now. On that particular morning, as Rashawn scrolled through her phone, the notification caught Damian's attention. His unease flared into suspicion, and he asked her about the request. "Just someone from work," she replied, trying to downplay it, offering an explanation that might have worked in another context. But Damian's concerns were already too deep. The response didn't ease his growing anxiety. For Damian, this wasn't just another random person wanting to connect online, it was a sign of something more troubling, a violation of boundaries he felt were being disregarded. The question that followed was simple but loaded with emotion: who is that? It was a question that would mark the turning point, the moment when a typical Sunday morning would unravel into chaos. What had begun as a simple, seemingly innocent conversation quickly escalated into something much darker. The tension in the room began to mount as Damian, already uncomfortable with the situation, demanded to see Rashawn's phone. What had started with a casual inquiry now became an interrogation. Damian's request, though seemingly straightforward, was loaded with suspicion. Rashawn, perhaps caught off guard by the sudden shift in tone, hesitated for a moment. But Damian's growing frustration didn't give her much room to respond. Without waiting for an explanation, he grabbed the phone from her hands. His eyes scrolled over the screen rapidly, searching for something, anything, that would justify his suspicions. As the seconds passed, his unease morphed into anger. Each swipe of the phone seemed to fuel his agitation. With each message he read, the situation became more volatile. His suspicions deepened, and with them, his resentment. What might have seemed like a simple online connection to Rashawn, just a professional acquaintance, a friendly gesture, was, in Damian's mind, evidence of something more. The cracks in their marriage that had been there for months, perhaps even years, suddenly felt wider, deeper. Rashawn tried to explain, tried to downplay the situation, but her words fell on deaf ears. "It's just someone from work," she said, trying to soothe him. But it was clear that her explanation only made things worse. Damian's eyes narrowed, his voice rising with each accusation. "You're always hiding things," he said, his words sharp and cutting. His anger grew louder, and it no longer felt like just a disagreement over a friend request. It had become personal. Every word he spoke seemed to strike a chord, each one hitting harder than the last. The room felt smaller as Damian's voice filled the space, accusing, berating, demanding answers. What began as a discussion about a digital interaction had transformed into an assault on their relationship, on her loyalty, and on her trustworthiness. For Rashawn, the argument felt like it was slipping out of control. The tension between them was palpable, the emotional distance growing with each harsh word. She tried to explain again, but the more she spoke, the more Damian seemed convinced that something was being hidden from him. The truth, in his eyes, didn't matter anymore, only the growing conviction that he was being deceived. What had started as a minor issue, something that might have been dismissed in another relationship, now felt like a battle for control. Damian's anger was no longer just about the phone or the Facebook request, it was about a deeper fear, one that Rashawn couldn't seem to calm. And as the argument raged on, the gulf between them seemed to grow wider, more insurmountable. As the argument continued to spiral out of control, Rashawn felt herself being cornered. Her heart raced, her mind flooded with a mix of fear and confusion. This was not a place she recognized. The emotional intensity of the moment was unlike anything she had experienced before. In the past, when tensions had risen between them, they'd argued, but it never escalated like this. This time, however, something was different. Damien's anger had become overwhelming, his words cutting deeper with every accusation. Feeling increasingly threatened and unable to escape the confrontation, Rashawn did what she thought she had to do. In a panic, she reached for the gun that was stored in the nightstand drawer, a weapon she had never used in this way before. It wasn't meant for violence, just for protection, something to keep them safe if danger ever came to their doorstep. But now, in the heat of the moment, it seemed to be her only option. With trembling hands, Rashawn gripped the firearm, her pulse pounding in her ears. She never imagined she would be in this position, standing in her own bedroom, holding a gun, facing her own husband. Her intent was clear. She wanted to create distance, to put an end to the argument, to send a message that this was not something she could control with words alone. She wanted him to stop, to back away before things got any worse. Her training, her instincts as a nurse, told her to defuse the situation. But instead of calming things down, the presence of the gun seemed to change everything. At 9:50 a.m., desperate to get him to listen, Rashawn pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the house, the sharp crack of the bullet splitting the air as it fired into the ceiling above them. It was a warning, a clear signal to Damien that she was serious, that she wasn't backing down. For a brief moment, there was silence, the shock of the sound hanging in the air, both of them frozen in place. But instead of retreating, Damien's response was immediate. His eyes locked onto the gun, and his anger, now intensified, focused solely on it. The warning shot, meant to create space, had done the opposite. It didn't calm the situation, it escalated it. Damien, now fixated on the weapon, took it as a challenge, not a deterrent. He didn't retreat, he advanced. Rashawn, still holding the gun, could only watch in disbelief as Damien moved toward her. She had hoped the shot would stop him, but instead, it seemed to push him further. In that moment, the situation shifted from a heated argument to a potential confrontation that neither of them could predict. The warning shot had crossed a line. And now, there was no turning back. In that moment, everything seemed to slow down. Rashawn stood there, trembling, the weight of the gun heavy in her hand. She had warned him, tried to push him back, but Damien didn't listen. The words, "back up," came from her lips, desperate, pleading for him to stop, to give her the space she so desperately needed. But they went unheard, lost in the chaos of the moment. Damien, his anger now fully consuming him, ignored her warning. He continued to advance toward her, determined, as if he couldn't, or wouldn't, accept the reality of what was happening. The distance between them closed with every step Damien took, and in that brief, fleeting moment, Rashawn realized just how quickly things had spiraled out of control. Her heart pounded in her chest, fear mingling with the shock of what was unfolding. She had never imagined it would come to this, that her life would be defined by a single, catastrophic decision. As Damien closed in on her, the room seemed to close in as well. There was no escape, no way out of the confrontation. Rashawn, feeling cornered and overwhelmed, felt a flood of conflicting emotions, fear, guilt, desperation. She wasn't trying to hurt him, not really. But her warning shot had failed to stop him, and now, as he reached out, as if to take the gun from her hands, she was faced with a terrifying choice. At 9:52 a.m., driven by sheer instinct and fear, Rashawn pulled the trigger again. This time, the shot was not a warning. It was a final, irreversible decision. The bullet tore through the air, finding its mark. Damien, who had refused to back away, was struck in the chest. His body jerked violently as the force of the impact sent him crashing to the ground. The sound of the shot reverberated in the room, drowning out everything else. Damien lay on the floor, his body limp, blood quickly staining the carpet beneath him. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The enormity of what had just happened crashed over Rashawn like a tidal wave. What had been a desperate act to protect herself, to stop the escalating violence, had now become something far worse. Her husband, her partner, was lying on the floor, motionless, and it was her hand that had delivered the fatal blow. In the moments that followed, Rashawn's mind raced, and her actions were driven by the shock and horror of what she had just done. As Damien's body crumpled to the floor, she dropped the gun, the weight of her decision sinking in. Without thinking, she rushed to his side, her professional instincts kicking in, even though her heart was pounding with fear and disbelief. She knelt beside him, desperately trying to revive him, her hands, trained to heal, now attempting to undo the damage caused in an instant of panic. She pressed down on his chest, performing CPR, the rhythm of her compressions erratic as she frantically fought to keep him alive. Her breath was shallow, her movements mechanical, almost robotic. She was doing what she had been trained to do, but nothing seemed to bring him back. The urgency in her voice was palpable as she called 911, pleading for help. "Please, hurry," she begged the dispatcher, her voice trembling. "He's not breathing. I'm trying CPR, but he's not responding." She couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. She couldn't believe what had just happened. But in that moment, it didn't matter. All that mattered was trying to save him. The minutes stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. Time had slowed to a crawl, and yet, with each passing second, hope seemed to slip further away. Rashawn's eyes darted back and forth, desperately searching for signs of life, but there was nothing. Damien's body remained still, his breathing shallow, his chest unmoving. As the 911 operator guided her through the resuscitation attempts, the reality began to set in. Her hands, once used for healing and care, were now covered in Damien's blood, blood that was rapidly spreading across the floor, staining the carpet beneath him. The professional, compassionate nurse who had spent her career saving lives was now the one fighting desperately to save the man she loved. Despite her frantic efforts, it was too late. By the time emergency services arrived, paramedics immediately took over, working to revive him. But there was nothing they could do. Damien Reed was pronounced dead at the scene. The damage was too severe, and even if medical help had arrived earlier, the outcome would not have changed. Rashawn, still on her knees beside him, was overcome with the realization that her actions, in an attempt to protect herself, had taken the life of her husband. In an instant, the woman who had once dedicated her life to healing had caused a tragic loss. Her hands, once symbols of care, now stood covered in his blood, a stark reminder of how quickly life can change when emotions overtake reason. As the reality of what had occurred set in, Rashawn's life began to unravel in an instant. The flashing lights of the police cars illuminated the otherwise quiet street as officers arrived at the scene. The neighborhood, once filled with the hum of everyday life, was now steeped in the weight of tragedy. Rashawn, still reeling from the events that had unfolded, stood frozen in the shock of her actions. There was no escape from the grim truth that had emerged from her frantic attempt to save her husband. The officers, responding to the 911 call, quickly assessed the situation. With her hands still stained with Damien's blood, Rashawn was taken into custody at the scene. The woman who had once been a trusted healthcare worker, known for her compassion and care, was now being led away in handcuffs. The same hands that had helped save countless lives now held the weight of her own decisions, decisions that would change everything. As she was escorted from the home, the weight of the moment pressed down on her. The streets outside the house, which had once felt so familiar, now seemed foreign. The life she knew, the family she had built, was slipping away with every step. Rashawn had been a mother, a wife, and a professional. But in that moment, she was now a defendant in a case that would consume her. Rashan was charged with second-degree murder, a charge that carried with it the possibility of years in prison. It was a devastating blow, not just to her freedom, but to her entire identity. The woman who had pledged to heal and protect now found herself facing the consequences of a momentary lapse in judgment. Her bond was set at $50,000, and as the legal process began, it was clear that she was entering a battle unlike any she had ever fought before. The criminal justice system would now decide her fate. Would she be able to convince a court that she acted out of fear, in an act of self-defense? Or would the evidence suggest an overreaction, an excessive response to a situation that could have been de-escalated? These questions would be at the heart of the legal proceedings, as Rashan prepared to face the consequences of a single decision that had changed the course of her life. The shock of the events that unfolded in the Wallace Reed household rippled through the community. Neighbors who had once known Rashan as a caring, professional nurse, someone who had dedicated her life to healing others, were now left grappling with the unimaginable truth. The woman they had seen as a compassionate caregiver had turned into the central figure in a tragedy that no one saw coming. In the days that followed, people in the neighborhood tried to make sense of what had happened. How could this have occurred? How could a simple Facebook notification lead to the loss of a life? The case raised troubling questions not only about the fragility of relationships but also about the potential dangers of social media in modern relationships. What seemed like a minor digital interaction, a friend request, had ignited a violent confrontation that ended in a senseless death. The question many began to ask was, how much do we really know about what goes on behind closed doors? What are the invisible pressures that people face, and how can seemingly small issues escalate into something catastrophic? Damien and Rashan's story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked emotions and the way domestic disputes can spiral out of control, especially when firearms are present. This tragedy serves as a stark reminder of just how quickly life can change. From a simple Facebook notification to a deadly confrontation in less than 2 hours, Rashan and Damien's world, and the lives of everyone around them, were irrevocably altered. It's a powerful lesson about the dangers of unresolved conflicts and the devastating consequences of allowing emotions to dictate actions. Domestic disputes are never just about the argument in front of us, they are the result of accumulated tensions, insecurities, and sometimes, dangerous impulses. And when a weapon is available, even a fleeting moment of escalation can lead to a tragic end. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic conflict, it's crucial to reach out for help. There are resources available to offer support, guidance, and protection. No one should have to face such situations alone. As Rashan's legal case moves forward, one question lingers in the air. Was this an act of self-defense, or was it an overreaction to a situation that could have been diffused? The legal system will decide, but the emotional and personal toll of this tragedy will resonate far beyond the courtroom. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective could help others recognize warning signs in their own relationships and perhaps prevent future tragedies. Thank you for watching. If you found this story important, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more in-depth coverage of cases that expose the darkest corners of human behavior.